Releasing music nowadays has never been so easy, or at least that's what it looks like on paper. There are lots of artists today showing us that all you need is a great song and a bunch of content and you can get millions of streams. And for some artists, that's true. That's all you need. The fact that that's possible today is amazing. And if you're one of those artists who can achieve success like that, awesome. But this doesn't work for everyone. The reality is, many artists don't see success this way. It's not uncommon to see great artists posting endlessly and getting next to nothing back for their efforts. And there are different reasons for this. It could be that their content isn't objectively great yet, but it also could be that their stuff just isn't getting pushed out. And this is a thing. Relying on algorithms is not safe. It is not always a case of just make better stuff. And even when that is the case, is it the best path for all artists? Is that the most effective way of getting their music heard? No. Although content is powerful, and I do think it should be a big part of your release plans, it's not going to work the same for everyone. Some artists can and do benefit from a different approach. One that includes content, but also factors in things like their circumstances and their preferences and their strengths and advantages and disadvantages. And so today I'd like to take you through a 5-step process to create your own solid release plan. Instead of me just telling you what to do, I'd like to show you how to tell yourself what to do. And this process or this framework is designed for flexibility. It allows you to create a plan based on your situation and preferences while also keeping you in the lines with a solid structure. I've taken a bunch of artists through this myself, or at least something very close to this, and it's helped them get great, realistic, and lasting results. And I say realistic because how big your results are totally depends on a bunch of stuff. If you've never released anything before and you have no fan base at all, you're probably going to get different results than someone who's been releasing heaps and already has a big fan base, right? And although there are cases where this has helped artists hit hundreds of thousands of streams and grow their fan base by thousands, even with debut releases, you've got to start where you are, be patient, and manage expectations. It's not always going to go that way for you right away, but that doesn't mean that you're automatically doing something wrong. You're playing the long game, right? So here's a glimpse at the 5 steps we'll be going through to help you create a powerful and personalized release plan. We start broad and we get more specific as we go. Step 1 is defining your release markers, when your releases will come out over an extended period of time. Step 2 is defining the main promotion periods for those releases. Step 3 is defining the marketing channels you'll use to promote your release. Step 4 is setting specific dates and tasks you'll need to do to promote your release. And step 5 is diving into those specific tasks in more detail. If this doesn't make total sense to you right now, don't worry, it will. So a few notes before we dive in. First, even though today I want to show you the process of putting your own plan together, to help you properly understand how this works, I'll be taking you through an example plan using this process. It's quite a full plan. It's not something that you have to copy, and it might not even be ideal or possible for you to do everything that I mentioned today. You might want to drastically simplify it, and that is fine. But this example plan is modeled off real release plans I've helped artists create. So if you have no idea where to start with creating a release plan and just posting to social media consistently isn't really working for you, you could follow this and then tweak it to better suit your situation. Okay, second note. To make this widely applicable, the plan I'll take you through is built with Spotify in mind. Although 99% of it could apply no matter where you're releasing your music, the way it's laid out is designed to leverage the power of the Spotify algorithm. All that means is, once your release is out, we try to get a whole lot of quality listener engagement in a condensed time. If we get enough, it will wake up Spotify. Basically, we'll get Spotify's attention. And then hopefully it starts pushing your music out across the platform through various playlists. So a lot of what we do will be prepping you to make a splash on Spotify in the early stages of the release. If you're not using Spotify or you don't care about playing the algorithm game, that's fine. This plan could still be pretty much exactly the same, just with maybe a bit less pressure to make things happen in a certain time frame. Okay, and final note before we jump in, we're going to use this release plan builder template I've made to show you visually how putting a plan together can work. If you like, you could build a template like this for yourself, or just write out the steps in your notes. Or if you watch this and you like the way the template is laid out, I do have this available on my website. It also comes with a simple content planner template as well. So I'll put the link for that in the description if you're interested. Okay, let's get into it. In step 1, we're looking at the big picture. Although nothing is mandatory, I feel like it's a really good idea to prep at least a few of your releases in advance. Ideally, you can prep over the next 6 to 12 months. As I'm sure you know, being an artist is a lot of work. Doing this can keep you on track, can help you build momentum, and it helps to just keep your head clear. So in this first step, all you have to do is decide on 1, how many releases you're going to put out over the next, say, 6 to 12 months, and 2, when each of those releases will come out over that time period. You can see on this release plan builder, I've got this set by default to having a release come out every month for at least 6 months, and in this plan they would be singles. How often you release is totally up to you. Roughly 1 new song a month is common for high-performing artists. This seems to be good for keeping fans engaged and also the algorithmic benefits. But it is ambitious, and that might not be right or possible for you. You might prefer to release a new song every 6, 8, or 12 weeks, or maybe less frequently. Or maybe you want to do the song a week thing if you're good at smashing out tunes like that. If you're releasing super frequently, your plan will probably be a lot more simplified. You won't really have time to make a huge deal of every release, and you don't necessarily have to because you're taking the pressure off any one song. If you're releasing less often, you'll probably want to put more emphasis on each release. So your plan will probably be fuller. Whichever way you spin it, what's ideal is you're consistently promoting your music. So as a rough guide, more frequent releases equals less promo of each song, and less frequent releases equals more promo of each song. You can decide what you want to do based on what you're good at and what you're willing and able to do. But for this example plan, we're going to go with a new release every 4 weeks, which is ambitious, but it can be really effective. Okay, what if you're releasing an EP or an album? If you'd prefer to do this, you can do one of 2 things. You can just release them as EPs or albums and not play into Spotify's game, which is totally fair, or you can split them up into single song releases and then bring them together at the end. You've probably heard of waterfall releases by this point. In case you haven't, here's how a waterfall release would work with, say, a 4-song EP. So you release song 1 from the EP, then say a month later you release song 2 from the EP and you attach song 1 to that release, then you release song 3 and attach songs 1 and 2 to that release, then you release song 4 and attach songs 1, 2, and 3 to that release, making it a full EP. It looks a little messy on Spotify, but it can be beneficial because it can get you more attention on each song. Because every time you release a new song and you attach an older song to that release, that older song gets more exposure, right? And you could do this for an entire album if you wanted. You could release one song at a time and then bring them all together at the end under one release. You don't have to do it like this though. What I see heaps with the bands I love is they first release a handful of singles from an upcoming album, and then they release the rest of the album all at once and attach those singles to it. It's still the waterfall release strategy, it's just they're not doing it with every single song. If you do want to release an album and you're not sure what to do here, I would just look at what's typical in your genre, at least as a starting point. I'm talking about metal here, where albums are super common. But if you're an electronic music producer or say a pop artist, you might want to prioritize singles or EPs. Okay, what if you want to release an EP or an album just all at once? That's fine. You do not have to play the Spotify algorithm game if you don't want to. What you could potentially do in this situation is treat the promotion side of things as if you were releasing singles, even though you're technically not. So even though you've released an entire 10-song album at once, you could promote each song from that album for a period of time, like it's a single. This could look like promoting song 1 from the album for like a month, then promoting song 2 for a month, and so on and so on. Or it could be that you cycle between all the songs on the album more frequently. For example, you put out a few videos for song 1, then a few for song 2, etc, etc. Then once you've been through all 10 songs, you go back and start promoting song 1 for a few videos and start the cycle again. There really are no rules here. As long as you're always promoting your music and you're not just doing the exact same thing for like 2 years straight, you're probably good. And of course you'll want to pay attention to how your audience responds and adjust accordingly, but you have options here. Okay, so to bring it back and wrap up step 1, again, we just want to define how many releases you're going to put out over the next 6 to 12 months, and when each of those releases will come out over that time period. And that's it for this step. We're keeping it really big picture for now. So let's move on to step 2, which is defining the main promotional period for each release. In this next step, we're figuring out how long you'll promote each release for, and also how much pre versus post-release promotion you'll do for each. So how long you promote each release for is obviously going to be impacted by how frequently you're releasing. If you're releasing every 12 weeks, you'll be promoting for a lot longer than if you're releasing, say, every 2 weeks. But let's get a little more specific. First, when I say we're defining the main promotional period for that release, I'm talking about the initial promo period around that release. You may want to end up promoting a release for much longer than the main period you've defined. If a song is doing really well, why not keep promoting it? There's no rule that says you can't, and it's typically what high-performing artists will do if they see one of their songs doing really well. But I do think it helps to define a main promotional period to kind of have like a baseline. This is good for your head, it's good for structure, and it's good for planning. So first you'll want to look at how often you're releasing, and then you'll want to strategically fill that space with promotion. On the release plan builder here, I've got a new release set to come out every month. And then I've got the main promotion period set to start 1 week before the release comes out, and continue on for 3 weeks after the release is out. So this main promo period would lead me all the way up to a week before the next release was set to come out, at which point I would start to promote the second release. And this leads us into the next point. How much pre versus post promotion for each song? This is my opinion based on the artists that I've worked with and the artists whose releases and promo strategies I have studied. Generally speaking, the bigger and more dedicated your fan base, the more pre-release promo is worth it, and the smaller your fan base, generally the less it's worth it. This is not a hard and fast rule at all, and I have seen the opposite work really well in some cases. But if you need a general guide, I would try to think of it like this. Here's my reasoning for this, and it's only based on what I've seen, so take it with a grain of salt. When you've got a bigger fan base, you're more likely to reap the benefits of pre-release promo. You'll be much more likely to actually create buzz around your release before it's out because people already care about you. Your fans will get excited about your upcoming release and actually stick around until it's out, ideally rushing on day one to listen. And the energy you put into things like getting pre-saves is more worth it because you can get enough that they'll really help give you that push on Spotify. When you've got a smaller fan base or no fan base, you're more likely to waste your energy on pre-release promo. Even if you do manage to generate some buzz, it's less likely that everyone will wait around until that release is out because they don't care about you as much yet. So even though some people might stick around and rush to listen on day one, you're likely to lose some of that initial interest, whether due to the algorithm not showing those same people your posts or due to them just not being that committed to you yet. And also putting energy into things like pre-saves often won't be worth it because you can't get enough for them to really do much. Basically, you want to be careful of how you're using your energy here. If you have no fan base right now, you're not likely to get the same results from the same efforts as someone who has a bigger fan base. So if you're not sure, if you've got a bigger fan base, more pre-release promo is probably okay and can even be advantageous. And if you've got a smaller fan base, less pre-release promo is probably better. If you have no fan base at all, or you have a really small one, I would recommend you just start promoting publicly once the release is actually out. That way you at least know that anytime someone discovers your release through your promotion, they'll be able to hear it immediately, and you're less likely to lose that potential fan. Regardless of how big your fan base is though, I would definitely prioritize post-release promotion. This is almost definitely where a lot of the attention is going to come from. So in most cases, you'll want your promotion to be heavily skewed towards post-release. And you'll want that main post-release promo period to last for a good chunk of time. Unless you're releasing really frequently, you don't want to release a song and then post about it for a week and then stop. This severely limits the potential attention it can get. If an artist is releasing roughly once a month, it is much more common to see them pushing that song for the entire month. And often it can go on well after that. They might start to taper off their promotion for that first song as the new one comes into the spotlight. But if the first song is doing really well, they might continue to sprinkle in promotion for that while they're promoting the second release, the new one. Here's a visual representation of what it could look like. This is, of course, not set in stone. Again, there are no rules here, but you worked too hard on these songs to talk about them for a moment and then just disappear. Okay, so to recap this step, you want to define how long you'll promote each release for and how much pre versus post-release promotion you'll do for each. I hope what we've talked about here will give you some more direction on what could work for you. But remember, this is flexible, not a rigid rule. You may want to adjust your main promotional period for each release as your fan base grows. Maybe over time, doing more and more pre-release promo actually makes a lot of sense. And you also may want to go a little off plan depending on how different releases are doing. If one of your releases is getting a ton of attention, I would not stop promoting that, because why would you? So get something solid down that works really well for you, but do stay flexible. Okay, let's move on. Step 3 is where you'll define the marketing channels you'll be using to promote your release. You've already figured out when you'll be releasing things and how long you're going to promote each release for. Now it's about deciding on the ways in which you'll promote them. This is where we really start to move away from just post lots of content and we start putting something a lot more personalized together. It's super common nowadays to hear that anything but content is a waste of time and it's only pulling you away from what really matters, which is more content. And if your content is amazing and it's working really well for you and it's driving lots of traffic to your profile or to your music, maybe you shouldn't put energy into anything else. Maybe you should just double down on that. But as we've talked about, this is not always the case. And I'd even say it's often not the case. If you're one of those artists who, despite your best efforts, just cannot get any traction on social media only with organic content, that's where this step comes in. I've seen plenty of cases where artists stop relying just on content, they start to introduce some of these other marketing channels, and they completely turn their release around. You do have options. You are not doomed if your organic social media game is just not that strong. Okay, so on this release plan builder template, you can see I've got some potential marketing channels you can use. In the using section, I've got some things I recommend more often. The things in the maybe and not using sections may be more suitable for you, and that is fine. But I'm going to focus on the using ones today because that's what I typically recommend you consider. So now I'll go through what each of these using ones are, then I'll talk a little about choosing the right ones for you. The first thing is social media content. I do recommend you include content as a major part of your release plan if you can, because even if your content doesn't perform that well or it's not really driving much traffic right now, having authentic content on your profiles that showcases your music, shows people what you're all about, and shows that you're active can still do a lot for you once you start getting traffic to your profiles. This is something I have to drive into musicians all the time. Just because you're not getting the views right now does not mean your content efforts are going to waste, as long as you're driving traffic another way. Posting on social media can still lead to listeners and/or fans and other opportunities like shows, interviews, and more. And ultimately, social media is going to be a great place for you to get close to your fans and build great relationships with them. We'll come back to content soon, but for now, just know that I highly recommend you include it at least as a part of your plan. Okay, the next thing on the list is ad campaign, which is running an ad campaign for your release. This is something I also highly recommend to drive traffic and build your fan base, both on Spotify and social media if organic content alone isn't doing that much. And although ads obviously cost money, I found that they can be like a savior for a lot of artists who aren't that great at the organic social media game. That is, of course, if they've got great music. The only ads I feel confident recommending are the ones that you set up through Meta's Ads Manager. I don't want to go into too much detail about them in this video, but it'll help you to know roughly how they work because we will be talking more about them in the coming steps. So here's a quick rundown. You set up the ad campaign through Meta's Ads Manager. The ad or ads show up for people on Instagram and maybe Facebook. When they click on the ad, it takes them to a landing page or a Smartlink, which looks something like this. This page will have your meta pixel on it, which is like a little code thing that tracks who lands on the page and then clicks over to the DSP behind the scenes. So when people click over to, say, Spotify, Meta will say, okay, algorithm, we just got a conversion, which is a listener. Now let's go find more people like that and get this artist some more listeners. There's a bit of a learning curve with this specific type of ad campaign, but I think it's totally worth it if you're considering going down the paid promotion route. So we'll talk more about the different stages of these ads in the next steps, but for now, let's keep moving on. Next on the list, I've got playlists. I definitely wouldn't rely solely on playlists as a strategy because 1, heaps of them are dodgy, and 2, they're not always reliable for getting people from discovery to listener to long-term fan. But they can play a decent part in you achieving your goals, so they've made the list. There are different kinds of playlists, and if you don't know what they are, I'd just Google the differences because there are heaps and heaps of articles and videos out there already. But here's a super quick rundown of what you might want to pay attention to. So first, you can pitch to Spotify's editorial playlists through Spotify for Artists if you upload your song early enough, and I think that's at least 7 days before the release. There's really no reason why not to do this. It can only help you. And these are playlists like New Music Friday or Fresh Finds. You may also want to pitch to user playlists, which are playlists created by users on Spotify. This can help boost your streams, but make sure you don't end up on a bunch of dodgy ones. And both the editorial and user playlists may help you get enough quality listener engagement that Spotify tries you out on its algorithmic playlists. These are things like Release Radar, Discover Weekly, Radio, and that kind of thing. So playlists, in my opinion, are not a standalone strategy, but they can help to get your music out to more people, so I do think it's worth considering them as part of your plan. Okay, next we've got word of mouth or social spreading. This is basically just getting other people to talk about or share your release. There is nothing more powerful than someone else recommending you. It does wonders for your credibility, and there's usually a lot more weight behind a recommendation than, say, just being discovered on a random playlist. And even though this isn't necessarily a way to get tons and tons of streams on its own, the listeners you do get from this will probably be higher quality, which is better, right? So you'll want to think about ways you can get other people to spread the word about you. You can do this on social media, online, and in real life. I helped a pop artist release a debut EP about a year ago, and he heavily lent into this. It was really effective. When he started out, he had no fan base, so he enlisted the help of as many people as he could, including his parents, to spread the word about the release. He had parents show their teenagers, and friends and family share it with everyone they knew who'd be interested. Combine that with some social media work, a bit of an ad budget, and a few other things, and he ended up with something like, I think maybe like 150,000 streams and a few thousand new followers across his platforms. These aren't mind-blowing numbers, but they're realistic and I think impressive for someone who started literally from scratch. And the word of mouth or social spreading part of that plan played no small part in it. Don't underestimate the power of it. Okay, next is special advantages. This refers to any special connections or advantages or opportunities that you might have access to that can help you get a better result for your release. Maybe you know someone who can get you an interview somewhere cool or on a podcast. Or maybe you have a way to get on the radio more easily than others. Or maybe you know an influencer who can promote your song or something. It could be anything. And don't be afraid to get creative here. I worked with an artist once who lived in, I think, New York, but he had a lot of connections over in China. So he leveraged those connections to get a lot more attention on his release over there. He also had a big WeChat list, which he leveraged to get more listeners. And that helped the Spotify algorithm push his song out more as well. I found that maybe half the time, artists do have some sort of advantage or perk or opportunity or connection that a lot of artists don't have. So have a think about any special advantages that you might have to help push your release a little more. Okay, next is the one-to-one list. This could very well be a part of the social spreading word of mouth thing, but I think it deserves its own little section. If you don't have a dedicated email or text list, which you should, it can be handy to make a list of all the people you could connect with one-to-one who would support your release. Every bit of support counts, and just like word of mouth, this can be so much more powerful than you think. Even if you've got 50 people on that list and you reach out and ask them for support in a meaningful way, such as listening to your release all the way through, saving it, adding it to a playlist, following you on Spotify and maybe social media, and recommending the release to one other person they know, that can do a lot for you, especially if you're just starting out. So these people could be online or in the real world, or both. And ideally, these people are relevant. It's good to get support from all angles, and you never know what kind of weak ties are going to help you get more listeners or fans or streams or whatever. But ideally, you're getting support from people who are actually into your art. They're actually into the kind of music that you make. But preferably, you do have an email list, and this is the next thing on our list. If you haven't started one yet, do it now. The longer you put it off, the more you'll regret it later, I promise. Having a list with contact info that you own, that keeps everything together, and that allows you to easily send messages out to a bunch of people at once is essential. And generally, the people you can get onto your list are into you. They'll typically support you in deeper ways than the people who just casually follow you on social media or who casually listen to you in a playlist. You'll want to send at least one email to this list around each release. Ideally more, but we'll talk a little more about that soon. And last in this using section is engagement or re-engagement. I'm referring here to engaging with people on social media, and these are both new people who don't know you yet and also people in your existing audience. When you interact with other relevant people on social media, it can draw attention back to your profile and your music. There are two major things you can do here that will help you. One is finding new relevant people to interact with. This could be similar artists and or their fans, people who are following and or commenting on relevant pages, or people who are sharing stuff that clearly shows they're interested in the kind of thing you do. The other thing is re-engaging your existing audience. You might have some people following you already who are or could be fans, but they've forgotten you exist because the algorithm. You can get their attention again by interacting with their posts, stories, or maybe by sending them a DM. This will wake them up again and hopefully get them checking out what you've been up to. And it will hopefully mean your posts start showing up for them again. This kind of engagement is something I highly recommend you do if you're just starting out building a fan base on social media. Yes, it can be a little time consuming. And yes, it can be difficult to find the right kind of people in the beginning. But if you don't have any money and posting content alone isn't doing much, this is a powerful and free way to get more attention on you. And even though you won't pull huge numbers by doing just this, if you engage meaningfully, these connections could lead to high quality listener engagement. And that is more important than just the highest number possible, right? Okay, so how do you choose which marketing channels to use in your plan? What I've laid out here are just some suggestions. You absolutely don't have to use all of these, and you can absolutely add in other ones if you like, but you've got options. I can't give you the perfect plan because I don't know you. Ideally, you could do everything in this using section, but you're a human and you might have limited time, money, or energy. So if push came to shove and you could only maybe commit to a couple of these, I would go for social media content and ads if you have at least a couple of $100 for a marketing budget. And I would probably go for social media content and playlists if money is limited. This is a super rough recommendation, so take it with a grain of salt. But a combination of content and then ads or playlists will probably get you closest to waking up the Spotify algorithm, which remember is what we're trying to do. This, of course, assumes your content is great, your ads are set up correctly, and the playlists you submit to are real and relevant. So if you're completely lost and you don't know what to do, you could start here, but don't just blindly follow that because you may have certain advantages or opportunities that other people don't. For example, if you have more free time than most people, you could potentially do more than others. If you have a much bigger budget than most people, you could maybe invest in more stuff to help you get your release heard. Although personally, I would probably just go for more ads. Or if you have connections that others don't, you maybe want to prioritize them to help you get ahead. And just make sure you're being smart. If you choose content and ads as your marketing channels, but you've only got $50 to put towards the ads and you're only able to make a handful of videos, maybe that's not the go. If you choose the engagement or re-engagement route as one of the main things, but you're planning on doing that for 5 minutes every few days, that's not going to get you far. It's important that whatever you choose will help you drive enough traffic. I really cannot stress that enough. I can't tell you exactly what that will be for you, but please keep this in mind as you pick your channels. Okay, so let's move on to steps 4 and 5 now, and we can tackle these together. We're now into the sections where we dig into the details. We've defined the big picture stuff. When your releases will come out over a year or 6 months, the main promotion period for each, and also the different marketing channels you'll be focused on to promote those releases. Now it's about laying out the actual tasks you'll need to do, which is step 4, and then going into the details of those specific tasks, which is step 5. What's on your plan here will largely depend on what you've done for the first 3 steps. So the example tasks I've got on this release plan builder are in line with what we've selected in the example plan for steps 1, 2, and 3. That's why you can see things about content and scheduling ads and playlists and that kind of thing. If you're only able to do a few things for your release or your promotion periods are really short, this section will probably look a lot less intense for you than what I've got here. But for the sake of showing you how this works, I've filled it up. So a super quick overview of how I've got this section laid out so you know what's going on. On the left here, we've got the tasks. Then here we've got when you'll start working on those tasks relative to whatever your release day is. Next to that is the actual date you'll start working on it. Next to that is unleash it, which applies to things that you start working on earlier but unleash later. For example, you might want to set up your ads a couple of weeks before the release goes live, but you want to actually unleash them on the release day, right? So that's what this is. And then next to that, we've got the unleashed date, which is the actual date you'll be unleashing that thing. Okay, so let's go through the tasks week by week. The tasks in this example plan start from 6 weeks before the release comes out. And I've only got things so spaced out so you're not overloaded on any one week. You could easily condense this into a much shorter time frame if you wanted. So let's start right at the top with artwork. I've got that you should start working on it about 6 weeks before the release. But really what I mean is ideally it's ready to go so 6 weeks before the release comes out. This is so that roughly 5 weeks out, you can get the song uploaded to your distributor of choice. We're getting it uploaded so early so it's out of the way, and also so we can pitch to the Spotify playlists early, which I'll talk about in a moment. This is kind of overkill. It's not super necessary to do this so early, but I've got it so far up on the list because there's a bunch of other stuff to do in this plan as well. After this, still 5 weeks out from release, we've got define message. This is about defining the story or message or selling point of your release, if it makes sense for you to do that. I don't know what kind of music you make, but it's a really good idea to try and have like an angle or a direction with your promotion. And we want to define this message or story or selling point early on so it gives us direction with our content. Under this, I've got engagement. And this could really be at the very top because I recommend everyone just start doing this as early as possible. As a refresher, this is interacting with other accounts on your platform or platforms with the intention of directing people back to your profile. Ideally, we want this to be an everyday thing, if possible. I know a lot of musicians don't like this and they don't have time for it. Totally understand. Again, this is optional, but I highly recommend it just because of all the good it can do. Okay, now we're on to social media content, and I've got here to start working on it about 4 weeks out. This may well be the single biggest part of your release plan. Ideally, we prep enough content to at least last us the entire main promotion period for the release. This is why we're starting so early, so we don't have to make so much stuff on the go once the release is out. As an example, let's say you've decided to do a week of pre-release promo and then 3 weeks of post-release promo, at least for the main promotion period. If you're aiming to show up 4 times a week, you'd want to try and prep about 20 pieces of content for that. Then when your pre-release promo starts, you can start firing those off or unleashing them. Again, you do not want to get caught in the middle of your release with no content prepared. It could be a nightmare. Okay, let's take a little detour here and talk a bit more about content. What should your content be? This could be a whole other conversation. There are lots of different types of content you could choose and then put your own spin on. I even have an in-depth course that dives deep into social media content for musicians, plus branding, releasing, social media growth, and more. But here I'll give you some basic guidelines to get you started. First, if you've got the kind of release that has a clear selling point or story or message, I would build your content strategy around that. For example, if your release is about a heartbreak, your content could focus on storytelling around that. If your release is a high energy dance tune, you could just make high energy performance content, or you could still use storytelling techniques to paint a picture of a scene or setting that suits the energy of your tune. Or if your release is super technically impressive, maybe you could keep it simple and just show off your technical skills in your videos. I'm thinking like highly skilled guitar work or drumming or something. This is extremely rough, and there's much more you can do than this, but it's a good start. So with your message, selling point, or story in mind, I would just choose a handful of content types you like and start making some videos. You don't have to overcomplicate this. It could be you have only 2 or 3 different content types, but you just make a bunch of variations on them. As for which content types you choose, there are no hard and fast rules, but I would try to at least include 1 or 2 types that 1, directly draw attention to your music, not just have it hiding in the background of the video, and 2, make sense with the platform you're on. If you want your release to do well, you cannot be afraid of directly promoting it. At the time of recording this, we're in an era where people value what I call soft direct marketing. This basically means that your marketing is direct and transparent, but still valuable to an audience. So videos that have your music as the main feature are not hiding away from the fact that you're trying to promote your music, but that still provide immediate and obvious value for others, should be at least a part of your strategy. If you don't know what to do here are some content types that have been shown over and over again to work really well. Performance videos, especially when there's clear visual and written storytelling hooks. Straight up introduction text-based videos. Storytelling videos in general. Reaction videos, skits. These are less common than they used to be, but they're still effective when they're done really well. They are high effort, but they can also be high reward. And also talking head videos or text-based storytelling videos that draw attention to you and the release. Of course, nothing is guaranteed, but these are a good start. An important note though, people are definitely becoming desensitized to a lot of this stuff. So I would choose a few of these types that you like and then do your best to put your own creative spin on them. It's not likely generic versions of these content types will work super well for you. You've got to push yourself creatively to make them stand out. I know you probably still have a lot of questions around this stuff. Again, please don't overcomplicate this. Just choose a few types, start experimenting, and go from there. And if you're really stuck, like I said, I do have a course that dives deep into all of this stuff. So if you're interested, you can check that out on my site, and the link for that is in the description. Okay, now how do you put this content out? So let's say you've got 3 different main types of content, and you've made a bunch of videos based on each type. I would probably just keep it simple and alternate between them. So for an easy example, let's say you've got 10 performance videos, you've got 10 introduction style videos, and you've got 10 storytelling videos. On day 1, I would post a performance video. On day 2, I would post an introduction video. On day 3, I would post a storytelling video. And then from day 4 onwards, I would just repeat the cycle again. Performance, introduction video, storytelling video, etc. This is not a rule, but it's easy to follow and there's no reason why you can't do this. I honestly don't think it matters that much at all how you kind of disperse them. This just makes sense to me. And as for what to post before the release versus after the release, if you're doing any pre-release promo, from what I've seen, you don't need to have different kinds of content for pre-release versus post-release. I haven't seen any evidence that posting a certain thing pre-release versus posting a certain thing post-release makes any difference at all. Of course, there's nuance to this. Different circumstances require different strategies, but as a general guide, I think your pre-release stuff can be pretty much exactly the same as your post-release stuff. Except of course, with your pre-release stuff, you'll want to talk about how the song is coming out, and with your post-release stuff, you'll want to talk about how the song is actually out. You may also want to include other types of content in your strategy that I haven't mentioned. Things like reposting user-generated content, reacting to stuff that other people say or post about your music, or just any clever ideas that come up as you're going through this whole process. These aren't things you can really plan out in advance, so I would just kind of create these on the go. But it really helps to have prepped a bunch of stuff beforehand so you're not completely overloaded when release time comes. And that's why we prep the main stuff in advance. You don't have to make all your content in week 4, but it's good to get a start really early on like this. Okay, let's get back to the plan. So under social media content, still 4 weeks out, I've got user-generated content. We just talked about this, but just so it's clear, user-generated content is content created about you by other people. If you have a fan base already, or you have a bunch of people who are willing to support you in this way, it might be worth reaching out to them early to get some stuff organized. Maybe they could make some content of them reacting to your song, or dancing to it, or listening to it in a setting that perfectly suits your music so it paints a picture for other people, or even just talking about how great it is. This can help spread the word about your release, and it's great for social proof. I would probably have them start actually posting this stuff once the release is out, but there's no reason why you can't prep some of it early. It won't always work like this, but if you're close with fans or other people who will support you like this, it could be cool to bring them in on the release and make them feel like a part of it. Okay, next in this week, I've got pitching to Spotify's editorial playlists. You don't have to do this so early, but you may as well get it out of the way. And if you've uploaded your song early, which according to this plan you have, then you should be able to do it at this point. I think Spotify wants you to do it at least 7 days before the release actually comes out. So it's not urgent, but why not do it anyway? You pitch to these playlists through Spotify for Artists. The option to do that will become available shortly after you upload your song. If you don't know how to do it, just Google it, it's super simple. Okay, now we're at 3 weeks out. If you're going to be running ads, the first task we've got for this week is to create a landing page for your ad campaign. Remember that landing page or Smartlink I showed you back in step 3? This is that. I used to recommend ToneDen for this, but now I'm not so sure after all of the recent trouble that they were having with things not working. So if you don't already have like a preferred Smartlink or landing page that you use, I would just do a bit of research to try and find the best one for you. Some are paid, some are free, some have different features that you might be interested in. So just watch a couple of videos or something and you'll find one. Okay, in this same week, I recommend that you also make your ad creative, which is the videos you'll be using for your ads, and also plan your targeting options. For the videos, you could probably get away mostly with using some of the stuff you've created for posting on social media. But you might also want to try a few other things. Sometimes weird stuff works for ads, so it's worth experimenting. And when I say targeting options, I'm talking about the audience or audiences you'll be targeting with your ads. This includes things like interests, genres, similar artists, age range, and countries. And the reason I'm suggesting you do this ahead of actually creating and scheduling the campaign is because it can take a surprisingly long time and it can be surprisingly frustrating to figure this out. Meta almost definitely won't have all the specific artists and genres and interests you want to target. And if you don't have experience with setting up these campaigns, it could end up taking you ages to try and set them up if you haven't planned for the worst with your targeting. So here's what I do if you're going to be running ads. First, I would write out a list of all the interests, genres, similar artists, etc. you might want to try and target in your campaign. Then I would start to create a pretend campaign in Meta Ads Manager and head straight to the targeting section. I would then type in all the targeting options you've written down and see if they actually come up, because I bet a lot of them won't. Then I would refine your original list based on what you find, and then also try and find and add alternative targeting options in this section. The idea here is when you actually get to creating and scheduling your ad campaign, you know exactly what you're going to be targeting. Otherwise, you might end up getting stuck in the middle of it and kind of creating a not so well thought out ad campaign. It happens all the time. For both your ad creative and your targeting options, I would try to have a few different options as well. You want at least a couple of different videos for ads, ideally more, and you want a bunch of alternative targeting options in case some don't work as well as you thought, which will almost definitely be the case. If you're not familiar with ads like this and you are planning on trying to use them, I would do more research than just watching this video. There's a learning curve here, so you could easily waste a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing. Next, and still 3 weeks out, I've got set up your pre-save if you're doing that. It doesn't have to be 3 weeks out. I would just shift it up or down depending on what else you've got to do. Okay, after that in this week, I've got find playlists and write pitches. This is referring to user playlists, not the editorials we mentioned earlier. So if you're using something like Submit Hub or you're reaching out to individual curators to pitch to them, I recommend you start collecting contact info and start planning out your pitches in advance so that you're not rushing closer to the release date. I don't want you to actually submit to them now. I just want you to prep for them so when the time comes, you can just fire them off easily. This is probably overkill again. You don't have to do this so far out. I'm just trying to keep this plan smooth week to week. But like I said, you could collapse this into a smaller time frame if you wanted to. There are a lot of dodgy playlist services out there and people who are just trying to take your money, so proceed with caution here. But if you find the right ones, and maybe that's a conversation for another time, they can give your release a boost. Okay, now we're at 2 weeks out before release day. First on the list is to create and schedule your ad campaign, if you're doing that. This is where you'll actually set everything up. You'll already have your targeting options and ad creative ready to go, so you can just set up the campaign, schedule it to go live on release day, and you're good. I've got this at 2 weeks out for padding. Sometimes things go wrong and you can't figure out why things aren't working. Maybe your ads get rejected or something weird happens with your account or something else. 2 weeks out is maybe a little bit of overkill, but you can tweak it as you see fit. Just make sure you allow yourself some time in advance because things do go wrong. Moving on, still 2 weeks out, I've got re-engage your existing audience. As a quick reminder, this is to wake up your followers who may have forgotten about you, bring more awareness to your profile, and so hopefully have them notice your release when you start talking about it. We've already covered what to do here in step 3, but this is where you'd actually start doing it. So if you've got a dormant audience, now is the time to start waking and warming them up. Okay, next on the list for this week is your one-to-one list. Remember how we talked about making a list of all the people you can reach out to personally to support your release? This is when you start making it. If the people on this list are close to you already, great. You can probably just reach out to them a day or so before the release to make sure they can help you get that listener engagement up on release day. You can ask them to do things like listen to the song all the way through, maybe multiple times, save the song, add it to a playlist, all the stuff we mentioned earlier. If you make a list and some of the people on it you haven't really been in touch with for a while, it might be a little weird if you just randomly reach out and you're like, hey, can you listen to my song? Can you support my upcoming release? So I would probably try to get reacquainted with them first. Ideally, you're always building relationships with people and you're keeping everything good. And ideally, this one-to-one list is always growing, and even more ideally, it's turning into an email list. Okay, also in this week, we've got your special advantages. This again is any opportunity, connection, or resource you can take advantage of to help you get eyes and ears on your release. For you, I have no idea what this is, but I figured about 2 weeks out is plenty of time for you to get anything organized. Feel free to move this around as necessary. And last thing for this week is to write and schedule any emails that you may need or want to send out. If you have a decent email list, I highly recommend that you write at least one email to go out probably on release day. But you could also create one or a few more leading up to the release. And maybe you even want to create a few for after the release. How you go about it totally depends. If you already have a regular email or newsletter that you send out, maybe you could, at minimum, just replace that with the release announcement, or just include the announcement in that. There are no rules here, but if your release is bigger, it's worth sending more emails. And if you are going to send more, I recommend you have a unique or interesting angle for each of the emails so it doesn't get repetitive to your audience. For example, maybe one email is a direct email about the release, another is a story about the release, and another dives into the lyrics for one of the songs or something. It could really be anything that you think your list would find interesting. Once you've got them written, if you can schedule them to automatically go out at the times you set, awesome. And if not, at least they're written and you can just press send when you're ready. Okay, so now we're at a week before the release, and the first thing we've got here is support sharing. I haven't really talked about this yet, but basically I think it's a great idea to start and build a support group full of artists who all support one another in various ways, such as listening to and sharing others' new releases. Starting and then starting to build this group is not something that you'd want to do a week before the release comes out. It's more something that you'd slowly build up over the long term, and it's never too late to start. But as this example plan is thorough, if you've got one, you can let them know that the release is coming out and you'd love it if they could help you give it a big push come release day. Ideally, you can set it up so that everyone in that group posts about your song on release day, and you can maximize listener engagement on that day to help the Spotify algorithm wake up. Also in this week, we've got Spotify and socials prep. This may include updating things like your profile picture, your story highlights, your Spotify photos, anything like that. It's not always needed, but basically you just want to make sure that once the release is live, everything looks and feels how it's supposed to relative to your current release. If you're releasing super frequently, I probably wouldn't worry about this. But if you're releasing less frequently, it might be worth updating things every now and again to kind of rejuvenate your presence. Okay, following on from this, I've got landing page or link for socials. You may want to set up a link in bio page for your socials, like for example, a beacons thing. If you're running ads, you might be able to duplicate the landing page you've created for that and use it on your socials, if it includes everything you need. I don't recommend though that you use the exact same landing page for your socials as you do for your ads. It'll make it too hard to see where the traffic is coming from, and you won't properly know how your ads are working. So you want something separate for your socials that's only for your socials. If you've been on social media for a while, you probably already have one of these. Just make sure that when you start promoting, your links are up to date. Okay, next we've got pitch to user playlists. I've got 1 week before release here, but it really depends. You might want to pitch a lot closer to release day, and different platforms and people might have different preferences for when you should pitch to them and that kind of thing. You could also just pitch once the release is out, and that's totally fine and super common. Just don't wait too long if you can help it, because ideally you can maximize listener engagement early in the release. And remember, you've already written your pitches by this point, so this should be really easy. Okay, so all this stuff has kept you super busy all the way up until release day. Now it's time for the release to go live. So everything you've prepped in advance will switch on today. Your release will go live, your ads will go live, a scheduled email will go out to your list, you'll do a big push with content, others will post about or share your release, you'll get all your one-to-one people to swarm Spotify, you'll change any links you need to so people can access the song. You'll basically do everything you can to get as many relevant people listening as possible. You want to get as much of that listener engagement as early as you can and get Spotify to start paying attention. So on top of the stuff I just mentioned, I also recommend you go extra hard on social media on this day. Make multiple feed posts about the release on this day. Don't be shy. Maybe one in the morning, one after lunch, and one at night. Post a bunch of stuff in stories, filling them up with people's reactions to hearing your release, anything they're posting about that you can repost, behind the scenes stuff, anything like that. You might also have a bunch of people to reply to who are listening. Make sure you respond to their messages if they're complimenting your work. Basically, this is going to be a busy day for you. You want to try and gain as much momentum as you possibly can. I haven't included things like going live or doing some sort of online launch party on social media or any kind of release day event, but if you want to do that, you totally can. You just really want to squeeze out as much excitement and attention as you can. All of it counts. All of it adds up. If you're super active on social media, talking to as many people as you can, engaging with people, plus you've got ads going live and you're ideally getting streams from all these other sources as well. You've got people sharing your stuff, reacting to your song, everything. All of this will hopefully help you make a big splash. But it doesn't stop there. Even after this big release day, you're still going. From here on out, you're posting frequently and consistently, day after day. You're constantly tweaking your ads to get them in the best place possible. You're staying on top of playlists and all the people who said they'd listen to your song. And you're engaging with as many people as you can. People in your existing audience and new people. All of the stuff in your plan that you can keep doing, keep doing. And especially for the first week or two after your release goes live, you want to be really on it. Throughout this time, you want to repost everything that gets shared about your music. You may want to get on stories to say a massive thanks to everyone who's listening and supporting, multiple times. If you have other things you want to add into your plan, like going live or having a listening party or doing a thing where you catch up with fans or something, whatever it is, go all in. We want it to feel like your release is a big deal. We want people to feel the excitement and like they have a reason to go and listen and to keep listening. The last thing you want to do is be timid about it and after release day just kind of disappear. Because if you do that, people will start to forget pretty quickly. Ideally, you want to be constantly pushing this masterpiece of yours and constantly keeping people engaged. I really want to drive this home. Once that release goes live, it's just the beginning. Everything after that matters a lot. It's the bulk of your promotion period. Up until this point, you've been working super hard behind the scenes to get prepped for all this stuff. Now it's time to work super hard in front of the scenes. You want to just go and go and go and go as much as you can. Success is not what happens in the first day or first week. It's what happens over the entire period you promote it for. And that could include promoting well into the future. Okay, we've been through a fair bit, so let's recap the 5 steps to keep it tidy. Step 1, you map out the big picture, defining when each release will be coming out over a longer period. For example, over 6 to 12 months. This could mean you're releasing anywhere from every 1 week to every few months, depending on you. Step 2, you define the main promotion period for each release. So you'll know how long you promote your releases for and how much pre versus post-release promo you'll be doing. Remember, you can absolutely go beyond this. This step is to set yourself a solid baseline time frame for each release. But in reality, it's often messier than this because some songs will do better than others and therefore you might promote some more or less. Step 3, you define the marketing channels you'll be using to promote your release. These are the different ways you'll promote, such as social media content, ads, playlists, etc. Step 4, you'll lay out the specific dates and tasks you'll need to do for your release based on the stuff you've defined in the previous steps. This list could be longer, like the example plan we covered today, or it could be much simpler and shorter. Remember, there is nothing wrong with just releasing a lot and posting a bunch of content, as long as it actually works for you. And step 5 is about the details of those specific dates and tasks. For example, what kind of content you'll make, the content of your emails, what your ad creative will be, etc. And we covered steps 4 and 5 together in this video. So this is a lot, I know. And the example plan I've taken you through today is definitely more on the intense end. You may very well decide that you want to or have to make your plan a lot smaller or simpler, depending on your situation. But I wanted to show you today that there's more than one path here, and also that you can personalize your plan. You are not stuck with something that doesn't suit you just because that's what works for someone else. I've found in this music world, there aren't many hard and fast rules. For every example of one thing working, you can find the exact opposite thing working just as well. So I think one of the best things you can do is learn to create your own path. If you're constantly relying on other people to tell you what to do, you might be holding yourself back. But if you know how to take control of your own situation, you can design a path that works best for you. I hope you'll use what you've learned today to make better decisions about getting yourself and your art out there. Again, if you don't know where to start, you can use this example plan that we've gone through today, but I do recommend you at least try to tweak it to better suit you. Please feel free to drastically simplify it or even add to it. Okay, just one more thing. What I didn't really mention today was the creative side of a marketing campaign. This 5-step process is about giving yourself structure, but you also might like to think about creative ways to leverage things like culture, the time we're in, trends, or even other areas of life to create a more successful marketing campaign. This could and probably would be through content nowadays a lot of the time, but thinking this way can help you come up with cooler stuff, more creative stuff. If you have a solid structure like what we've gone through today, and you can think about ways to leverage stuff like what I just mentioned, you'll probably be able to come up with something amazing. But that does require a lot of thinking and extra work. So even if you don't do that, knowing how to create a personalized plan with something like this 5-step process that we've gone through today can still help you get great results. Okay, I'm leaving this one here. I hope it helps. If you like the look of this release plan builder in Notion, you can grab it on my website. The link is in the description. It also comes with a simple content planner template. I've been told by my past students in my course that it's really helpful, so I hope it is for you too. And speaking of, if you'd like to go further than just creating a release plan, my course, Awaken Your Fanbase on Social Media, takes you through all the important stuff for building a fanbase on social media. I take you right into the details of defining your artist identity, social media content, social media growth, releasing music, and more. And if you're interested, there's a link in the description for that too. If this helped you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And if you have anything to add or any questions, just leave them in the comments. Thanks so much. Talk again soon.